Today, we're talking about a guy whose life choice was so extreme, so completely out there, that it kicked off a global movement that's still around today. This is the story of Saint Anthony the Great, and it all hinges on one absolutely unbelievable decision.
No, I mean really, stop and think about that. Your house, your money, your family, your entire future, just gone. What could possibly motivate someone to do that? Well, for Anthony, this wasn't some hypothetical question. It was a direct command.
So let's get right into it. Let's look at that one moment of radical sacrifice that started this whole incredible journey.
Okay, so picture this. It's Roman Egypt. Anthony is just a 20-year-old kid. His parents have just died, which is devastating enough. But now he's suddenly in charge of his younger sister and a massive fortune. He's at a crossroads that honestly is almost impossible for us to imagine.
And when we say fortune, we're not talking about a little nest egg. We're talking about 300 acres of prime, fertile land in Egypt. This was serious, serious wealth. A life of total comfort and influence was just handed to him on a silver platter.
So about 6 months after his parents' death, he walks into church and he hears this verse from the gospel being read. And for Anthony, wow, this isn't just a nice spiritual thought. He hears it as a direct, literal instruction meant just for him.
And he doesn't wait. He doesn't think it over. He just does it. He sells the land, gives every last bit of the money away to the poor, makes sure his sister is safe in what was basically an early convent, and then he turns around and walks straight into the desert with nothing.
But his journey wasn't about finding some peaceful retreat. For Anthony, the desert became a battlefield for his soul. For nearly 2 decades, get this, 20 years, Anthony lived in total solitude inside an old, abandoned Roman fort. That's 2 decades with zero human contact, just him wrestling with his own mind and spirit. And the stories of his struggles are legendary. They say demons besieged him, not just as some abstract idea, but as tangible manifestations of his deepest fears and temptations. He saw wild beasts, visions of beautiful women, even giant piles of gold just appearing out of nowhere, all trying to lure him back to his old life. This was a psychological war. It's no wonder this inner turmoil became an absolute obsession for artists hundreds, even thousands of years later. Why? Because it's the perfect picture of the universal human struggle, right? Our battle against our own inner demons. Anthony's private war became a symbol for all of us. And that brings us to the great, almost funny irony of Anthony's life. The man who wanted nothing more than to be totally and completely alone ended up becoming a leader to thousands. This really lays out the central paradox of his entire story. He ran away from the world to find God, but his reputation for wisdom and holiness got so huge that the world literally followed him into the desert. People just wouldn't leave him alone. So eventually, he kind of gives in and starts organizing all these people who've come to learn from him. They started calling him Abbot, which is pretty cool because it comes from the Aramaic word Abbot, which just means father. And just like that, the hermit who fled society became the father of Christian monasticism, creating the very first blueprint for that way of life.
All right, so if you're ever in a museum and you see a painting of some old hermit in the desert, how do you know if it's St. Anthony? Well, the secret is all in the symbols.
Each of these tells a little piece of his story. The pig, and no, it wasn't his pet, is a shout-out to a medieval order that raised pigs to fund hospitals in his name. The bell he often carries, that was for warding off demons or for collecting donations. And that T-shaped cross, the Tau cross, symbolizes his authority and his incredible lifespan. He lived to be 105. And that whole connection to healing is huge. He became the go-to patron saint for people suffering from these really painful skin diseases that actually became known as Saint Anthony's Fire. And it all ties back together. His followers would use pig fat to make healing balms for the sick. So, his incredible life came to an end in a way that just tells you everything you need to know about who he was, right down to his very last wish.
I mean, look at this timeline. His life spanned over a century, from that first decision to just walk away to emerging decades later as this reluctant leader. His entire life was this act of radical devotion. He literally created a new way to live that would end up inspiring millions. But don't think his solitude was a total retreat from the world. He actually broke it on two really important occasions, once to go and support Christians who were being persecuted by the Romans, and again to travel to the city of Alexandria to fight a major religious debate known as the Arian heresy. He knew when his voice was needed. And here's the kicker. His final wish was to be buried in a secret, unmarked grave. He did not want people turning his tomb into a shrine. The man who had become a living legend wanted to avoid becoming a relic. He spent his entire life trying to disappear in service to God, but in the process, he became completely unforgettable. So it leaves you with this question, right? Did he succeed? Is the greatest legacy found not by seeking fame but by trying to escape